Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. New Jersey is the birthplace of the only magazine in the country to cover the marijuana growing industry. Noelle Skodzinski is the co-founder and editor of Cannabis Business Times. I think this is an obvious question, but where did you come up with the idea for the magazine?
The idea actually was from a guy named Tim Herms. He's a publisher and a brilliant entrepreneur. So he had this idea to launch a publication in this space, basically a website and a newsletter. So he came to me and said, develop the editorial vision. I've been an editor for 20 years, and we both kind of ran in some of the same circles and worked for some of the same companies. So he said, take your vision and take it and make it grow. No pun intended. But
why marijuana?
I think Tim and I both kind of believed in the cause, felt that we could be advocating a little bit more, especially for the businesses. Coming from B2B publishing, there's a lot of businesses in this market that they're really struggling. There's so many regulations that they have to deal with, and with a federally illegal product. But Tim also saw this as a big business opportunity, a new market to get into.
Yeah, it's the federal laws against marijuana. They're the same federal laws that oversee heroin and some other drugs, and yet a popular opinion has been changing on it. The laws have not been changing. Do you see the federal law changing anytime soon? I know that the state laws have changed.
Yeah, so I do actually. I think it will take some time, but I think that 72% of the population in the country believes that marijuana should be decriminalized. That's got to translate into government action at some point. The medical marijuana, 23 states and DC have programs. The federal government classifies marijuana as a Schedule I drug with heroin, like you said, and LSD, and those drugs are said to have no medical use whatsoever. That's obviously not the case for marijuana, and they're really just scratching the surface of medical uses for the drug. So I think that the first thing that's probably going to happen is that they are going to reclassify it, at least to a Schedule II drug, and open the door for more research to be done. Give
me an idea of how much the business has grown since decriminalization and legalization in state after state.
So, the first year, I think, is kind of when I started tracking the numbers that Colorado and Washington rolled out. It was like a $2.1, $2.3 billion industry.
Wow.
In 2015, so recreational is driving the bulk of the revenue. Medical is still, comprising a lot of it, especially in California and Arizona. But this past year, the revenue that was generated was about, I think, $5.4 billion. They're expecting in 2016 it's going to jump to 6.7. And that's not even considering the fact that this coming election, there's a very good chance that 4 or 5 more states will legalize recreational use for adults. So it's just going to keep growing.
What are the 4 or 5 more states?
So California is one that they're considering a shoo-in, that voters are going to pass that. Arizona is another one, Nevada, Maine, and Massachusetts.
All out west, isn't that interesting? And when you go around our area, especially in New Jersey, but even going into New York and Pennsylvania, up throughout the Northeast, except when you're up in Maine and Vermont, there are many governors, both Democrat and Republican, who say they're never going to sign a bill that's going to legalize marijuana. Yeah. And so it's not going to happen. Let's stay with New Jersey. It's not going to happen in New Jersey anytime soon, right?
Well, interestingly enough, there are people who think it's going to happen, and there's people right now. There's an organization called New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform. They are basically a coalition of a number of other groups, like the ACLU of New Jersey, NAACP, and there's a group, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. They're actually working with legislators right now on a bill that they're planning to introduce this year, which would legalize and regulate marijuana like alcohol. And they are very optimistic that there's enough support in the legislature to pass it. But then obviously they're expecting Governor Christie to veto it. He has flat out said he would veto any legislation that came to his desk. So what they would then do, they would hope for a legislative override of the veto. And if that didn't happen, the legislature could refer it to the voters for a constitutional amendment. But
all that takes time. So chances are it wouldn't happen until there's another governor.
Probably, yes.
Which isn't, I mean, it's about a year, another year and a half, you have 2 years, so, and that's what's going to happen. It must be fascinating when you meet people and you tell them what you do. What's the reaction?
So it's funny, my husband and I talk about this. We, both of us get either one of two reactions. You either get people who are fascinated and they say, oh, that's such a great job. How did you get that job? And they want to know everything about it. Or you get people who say, oh, and it's just silence. So it's sometimes a little bit awkward, I think, for people who aren't as comfortable necessarily talking about it, and they're just not aware of the industry that's developing around this product.
Right, because I would think that what you're writing about and what your magazine is based on is the business of it, the industry behind it, and not marijuana. Do you necessarily take a moral stand on marijuana?
No, we don't. We have one department where we cover we call it Roots of Change, and we cover someone who's been an advocate and done a lot of positive things for the industry, but the rest of the magazine is all about the business. And we do cover a lot of horticulture topics, so helping professional growers maximize yield and maximize efficiency, lower energy usage, that kind of thing. But it's everything to help them be successful as legal businesses.
All right, Noelle, thank you for being here. Noelle Skodzinski, co-founder and editor of Cannabis Business Times. That wraps up Jersey Matters for this week. I'm Larry Menti. Stick around for another thing.